you already know that central nervous system is divided into brain and spinal cord. Brain and spinal cord. And as you all know that brain and spinal cord have two major distribution in it. When you talk about central nervous system, you always have to learn things in terms of gray matter and white matter. What is this gray matter and what is this white matter? You need to understand this concept very well. My dear friends, when we talk about gray matter and white matter, there is a neuron having a cyton, a cell body. It is having a axon. So when you talk about gray matter and white matter, this is the collection of cytons. Cyton is the soma, the cell bodies of neurons. So collection of different cell bodies of neurons together forms a gray matter, while axons, the collection of myelinated axons together forms what is known as white matter. So white matter is the collection of axons and gray matter is the collection of cytons. Why it is termed as gray matter and white matter? Why we call it is gray and why we call it as white? When we take central nervous system out of the cadaver and we take a section of it, it can be a sagittal section, it can be a transverse section, it can be a coronal section. We have taken a section from the cadaveric brain, right? Let's say we have taken a section from the cadaveric brain. Let's say this is the right hemisphere and this is the left hemisphere, and we have taken a transverse section. What we will see? We will see that this entire brain is divided into some darker portion and some lighter portion. The darker portion appears to be grayish and the lighter portion is relatively whiter. In this section you may see there is a lot of darker portion in the outer side of the brain, in the outer surface of the brain. This is just a representative diagram. They will be having a lot of gyri and sulci, and I have not drawn that in this diagram. Again, in the left side also you will be having similar distribution, that is the outer surface will be having a darker gray matter, and the inner of the cerebrum is mostly white matter, but again in the inside there are some collections of gray matter. So this is how we see when we take a section of brain. This outer gray matter of brain is known as cortex. The collection of gray matter in the inside is your different types of nuclei. Collectively they are called as nuclei, and if we talk about individual, that is also known as nucleus. This is not the nucleus of a cell. This is a term given to the collection of gray matter in the central nervous system. So this is how the gray matter is distributed, and what else you are looking here is this whole area, all of them is nothing but white matter. So this greenish area what I have shaded is white matter. What about spinal cord? My dear friends, when we talk about spinal cord, when we take a section of spinal cord, let me show you how does it looks like. If I draw a section of spinal cord, it looks like something like this as a transverse section. So it is having the gray matter that is primarily inside. In the brain, the gray matter was primarily outside, while in the spinal cord, the gray matter is primarily inside. So this is your gray matter. So this is your gray matter and this is your white matter. My dear friends, this is the anterior of spinal cord and this is the posterior of spinal cord. If we write about some terms in the spinal cord, there is a canal you can see over here. This is the central canal, and if you see this gray matter, this is the posterior side. So this is posterior horn of spinal cord, and this is the anterior horn of spinal cord. My dear friends, you should also know that there is one more horn, and that is in the lateral side. This is the lateral horn of spinal cord. This is the lateral horn of spinal cord. In very brief, let me tell you, this posterior horn of spinal cord is having nuclei for sensory pathway. This posterior horn is having nuclei for sensory pathway. This anterior horn is having nuclei for motor pathway, right? So, anterior horn is for motor pathway, the nuclei for the motor pathway, and the posterior horn is for the nuclei of the sensory pathway. So, you have to remember this. And what about this lateral horn? This lateral horn is having the nuclei for autonomic nervous system, nuclei for autonomic nervous system. And what about these white matter? If you see the spinal cord, you may see there is a lot of white matter in the outer side of the spinal cord. So, what are these white matters? So, these white matter is the axon bundle coming either from the spinal cord to the cortex, to the brain, or from the brain to the spinal cord.